Welcome to the beginning of the Shuffler Saga. In this video, I'm going to talk about why I care about the fairness of the Shuffler, how you're getting illegal shuffles in your Magic Arena games. We're going to talk about the footage in question where what I believe is a highly improbable stretch of card draw has happened. And after that, we're going to show some example shuffles, just very quick. I've linked a video in the description of a more thorough approach by professional Reed Duke, and that should give you an idea of what to expect from an actual shuffle produced by a human rather than a, quote, random assortment of cards pulled out of a hat by a computer. We will examine the path that cards take through a series of Riffle shuffles and how that can be used to either generate randomness or to at least prove that the shuffles generated by Arena are sometimes not capable of being done by humans. We're going to examine why Arena is giving you shuffles that are illegal by the rules of the game. And we're going to talk about why Wizards smoothing out the hands that you get, which has been proven many times over, and again, article linked in the description, but why that smoothing out means a normal probability calculation does not work. Or saying, oh, you had to draw so many cards in a row, and then you had this percentage. It doesn't work like that when you clip the tails, and we'll get into that. We're going to talk about some very big numbers, and I encourage you to explore more on that fascinating topic on your own. Powers of 10 is a classic. It's on YouTube for free. Look into things like the Heatdeath of the universe, extremely long time scales, very small scales of time and distance. All of these things are very fascinating topics and will just expand your ability to understand things a little more easily. We're going to demonstrate how Magic the Gathering Arena can falsely represent the state of a deck because of how it smooths out opening hand selection. And then finally, we will go over some quick visualizations about how easy it is to remove illegal shuffles and then review the code that I used to make that visualization. Really quickly, I just wanted to say that the reason I'm making such a big deal about the way the Arena Shuffler does things is because it affects the meta. The meta is crushed down to faster and faster decks because you have to be able to just draw through potentially having things like 3 or 4 lands for 17 turns. And because of that, mid-range decks suffer, period. Late game decks are basically impossible if you want to get to high level, like if you want to push for a mythic. And it's simply because Wizards isn't bothering to do a better job at shuffling the cards. And so the meta is limited. It could be so much more varied. There could be so many more viable decks in Arena, and people could have so much more fun. Like a 10-minute match would actually be enjoyable because both people would be able to go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and it probably wouldn't even last 10 minutes, The point is the number of viable decks is artificially limited because of Shuffler's poor performance. Shit like this literally does not happen in real games. It literally does not happen. What is going on? I think you get Shuffler fucked if you play too fast and win too many times. Like, they just hard enforce bad shuffles. You either get land fucked or flooded, because this is insane. Absolutely insane. That, oh man. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You literally cannot shuffle a deck that poorly doing a normal shuffle. So the way the Shuffler is shuffling does not mimic a real life deck shuffle. All right, thank you for watching. We're going to demonstrate that with 22 lands like I had in that deck in the clip, it should be impossible. It should be literally impossible to have 17 cards in between land draws. So, in that video, had 22 lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. That means we need 38 non-land cards. Doesn't matter what the hell it is. Just demonstrating cards that aren't lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. 37, 38. I think 38 and 22 makes a 60 card deck. Now, the way an actual shuffle for the game of Magic the Gathering, the way it's supposed to go with the splits and the chunks and the mashing up, the full randomization, the way a Magic the Gathering shuffle is supposed to be executed, video linked in the description, because Magic Arena has online games and tournaments that reward you with real money and products that are worth real money. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but the randomness, the shuffling in Magic the Gathering Arena should be regulated somewhat, because you're competing for monetary prizes, products that are worth real money, and you can pay real money as an entry fee. And unfortunately, the laws don't necessarily match up with that, and so ultimately you need to be very careful with your money and, you know, the things that your time and your money spent on this game to try and enter tournaments and stuff like that. Be aware that you're going to have to deal with statistical potential unlikelies. Giant block of cards, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then there's a land, and then there's 3 more cards, and then there's a land, and there's 3 more cards, and there's a land, and there's 3 more cards. Nowhere near 17. So even all right, we haven't done the chunking, right? Even if you chunk it perfectly, right? So throw all the black cards there, and then you would throw this chunk like that to have a nice big section, and then, right, you would magically separate here, throw this chunk there, and then magically, how would we do this? Yep, we would throw this entire chunk ahead. So he would go shadoop, shadoop. Oh, I missed one. See, I can't even do it because, you know, hands like that, and then that one would end up on top. And even then, nowhere near 17. My goddamn fan. Okay. Nowhere near. Separate. 17. So, right? That's what we're looking at. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. In a 22 land deck, throwing chunks of cards around as stacked as it could possibly be, while still pretending to be random, we managed to get 12 cards. If you see this in your starting hand, you're not keeping that starting hand. You're going to mulligan. And what do you do when you mulligan? You're supposed to shuffle. You're supposed to redistribute. You're supposed to break up the thing that made you mulligan in the first place, right? So even after that, right, there's a big chunk here, but it's nowhere near 17. And if we, again, stacked the deck, right, do our big old chunk there, and then magically it gets separated, and then, like, okay, so shoop, shoop, shoop. Oh, wow, look at that. Man, that's crazy. How many cards did we manage to stack? Whoa, How many cards do we manage to stack? It's hard to keep it on camera as I'm not used to doing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So we got one more card. And most tournament, if you're playing in an actual event, they would not accept that as a final move for the shuffle, right? They wouldn't let you go, and I'm done. No, they expect you to do this bit again. Usually at least 3 times is what they expect, or something like there's an expected minimum number of times that these little groups are supposed to be, oh sorry cameras, supposed to be splitting up and dividing. And again, starting from a complete division of like, you know, greens on this side, blacks on this side. Just even with 3 moderately reasonable shuffles, there's no way you end up with 17 cards in between lands. It is literally impossible. Right, so how many lands did we just manage to stack up right here? Like, this is the crazy scenario where you get flooded even though you got 19 lands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 out of 19, right? Okay, so those came from here. Let's pretend, right? So how do you get land flooded? With the cards before that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's perfect example. Perfect example, right? You get a hand that has 2 lands and then 5 other cards you can play. You think, all right, maybe that's something I can work with. No big deal. You keep your 2 lands, your 5 non-lands, and then as you draw, like, dang, wow, yeah, we got land flooded. That's nuts. 7 lands in a row. And then what do you get? 3 non-lands. What happens in Arena? One of these, and then another land, right? You end up with an 18% chance to draw a land card. 75% of the cards you draw in your first 10 turns. A very interesting visualization here, thanks to the real Franklin S. It takes 8 shuffles doing that perfectly to bring the deck back to its normal starting position. Notice on the very top and bottom, the blue and red lines that indicate those cards staying in those positions the entire time. Someone clarified that is because this is an out shuffle that was being done. Then the other way to do it is the in shuffle. The in shuffle produces a more random, it's not really random since you're doing a perfect shuffle, but if you were to do something like swap one of these data points here and then do the shuffle, and then after that swap one of these data points and then shuffle. You know, if you introduce one random bit each, you know, in these first 3, then you end up over here with something that, yeah, it has a couple of groups, because in these 2 iterations you can draw a line through here and none of these colored lines will repeat. And so flipping a bit here and here, you know, by this point, yeah, you'll have some things grouped up, but as demonstrated in the, you know, black and green shuffling earlier, you're not going to end up with 17 non-land cards in a row. You know, this is a 52 card deck, so these are what, like 13 cards each. So swapping bits here and here would get you, you know, a pretty decent random shuffle. You can add 2, you know, I swap 2 bits here and here, and then you get an even more actual feeling random shuffle. Yeah, like I said, you will get groups of cards, but you will not get 17, 18 cards in a row. There we go. Okay. Goldfishing, blah, 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 blah. Play sleeve cards, sliding 2 halves on each other, mash, whatever. 10 different colors of sleeve, 6 each. Okay, so even they did an even worse example, because then you would need at least 3 groups to represent the chunk of lands. That would only get you to 18, which is like an impossibly low number of lands to run unless you're running mono red. I shuffled that rainbow deck up, see what happened. Patterns came up very quickly. Changed entirely when I started goldfishing with the deck. I don't know exactly what the fuck that means, but it doesn't matter. yeah, patterns will emerge. Big fucking deal. It's not 17 cards in between lands, right? And again, in order to demonstrate anything close to that, they would need at least 3. They would need 3.5 groups. 4 groups would put, I mean, you could try 4. That put you at 24, which is the extreme upper end of lands, right? So the way they did it, sure, it's possible to demonstrate, but not effectively. That's the way I did it. I just bright green for the lands, black for everything else, and hopefully that demonstrated the point. Let's scroll the way back up to the top. So you can imagine this with a couple extra lands. It's 8 extra cards, right? It would get meshed up, yeah. And then the most important thing is just flip a bit here, flip a bit here. Next iteration, flip a bit here, flip a bit here. And then do here and here again, because, you know, the cards have gone down, down, up. Down 2 times. Things have come up from here, so you flip these bits. And then boom, boom, boom. By here, you'll have a pretty random assortment. And again, this is because it's one type of shuffling. If they did in shuffling, it would be an even better result. And it would take a minimal amount of processing power. There's a whole thread that goes into a lot of technical analysis, and I've been reading through it. It's kind of nuts. So that's one thing, but it's from a long time ago too. So this is a program to just do a simple riffle shuffle. We're going to examine the shuffling situation because it's not great. Don't waste your money on gems and play in a tournament, because you could get screwed for no reason at all, just because Wizards has an unfair shuffler. I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to say, is do not waste your real money on tournament gems and stuff like that, entry fees, whatnot. It takes a long time to save up that 20 and 25,000 gold, so be very careful with how you spend all of the time that it took to get that gold. You know what I mean? I would probably recommend playing best of 3, but even then, no guarantees. But I'll say that right now, right? I believe Wizards should try to make the Arena Shuffler kind of close to reality. If you play this subset, if you accept the theoretical statistical possibility that, yeah, man, it's possible to draw 17 cards, or 17 cards with no lands. If you accept that as a theoretical acceptable possibility in your shuffles, then you are also accepting the fact that you can draw nothing, literally an unplayable hand, every second of your life to an effective infinite number of lifetimes. That's what you're saying. But if you want your statistics and your probabilities to be 100% true, and you want to say, oh yeah, well there's a such and such percent chance, like, oh yeah, you know, like there's a 0.006% chance. Well, in that case, there's also a non-zero chance that you shuffle the deck in a way such that all your land cards end up just on the top or the bottom compared to where they were. Right? If you want to say, oh, we have to consider all shuffle possibilities, you also consider the shuffle possibility where you just turn the deck over and call that a shuffle. We all know that does not count as a shuffle. But if you want to say that you have to consider all of these possibilities, you have to also agree that flipping the deck over counts as a legal shuffle. And you cannot do that, which is why you cannot use all of the same probability calculations that you can for something like pulling balls out of a bag. All right, welcome back. Hopefully we'll be able to capture this illustration to demonstrate the difference between determining probabilities for something like drawing cards from a deck which has been shuffled, its order has been established, and it does not change, versus all of the typical methods for calculating probabilities in which you have something like balls that you are taking from a bag. And for that, we have 3D printed test Buddhas for calibrating that lovely used new to me machine, and the jigsaw bag, which is the most interesting thing I've got. Sorry, it's a little bit dirty. It's dirtying my desk. So these effectively are balls. This is effectively a bag. You put the balls in the bag and you mix them up, right? This is the assumption that you make for saying, oh, within n number of events, you're looking for these to happen or these not to happen. And then when this happens, then X, Y, and Z happens. So we can all start off agreeing that we have the basic assumption that once a thing is drawn, it's removed from the set, right? So, bam, number 5. Number 5 is out, okay? Number 5, gold, because there's white ones and there's, shiny ones. So, we'll say this is a non-land card, right? So you've drawn the non-land card from the deck, and it's out, all right? So, theoretically, your chance of drawing a land or not, right? Yeah, your chance of drawing a land has increased theoretically. In this scenario, yes, that is true. When you're trying to determine the probabilities of drawing a card in a deck, though, that's not necessarily the case. And hopefully I can provide a visualization and an easy way to show that Wizards probably is enforcing losses, but that's a secondary point. So this guy's been removed from the deck, right? So mix them up. We draw a new, bam, look at that, perfect. So our chances were slightly higher to draw a land because we took this out of the deck. So mix them all up, right? You're trying to determine the probabilities of, wow, look at that, we just drew a land and it was the exact same one. Wow, what are the probabilities of that happening? Well, there's 8 of them in there, so it's a 1 in 8 chance, right? So that mix-up is equivalent to a shuffle. That shuffling is not happening every time you pull a card from a deck. Because that shuffling is not happening every time you pull a card from a deck, you cannot make the same assumptions about probabilistic outcomes that you would if you were drawing balls from a bag. And because the way humans shuffle is easy enough to mimic, I'm not trying to make a shuffler that does not ever produce results where there aren't things like 15, 16, 17, 18. Getting 18 lands is extremely weird. Getting 15 in a row, or non-lands rather. Getting 15 non-lands in a row, yeah, it happens, okay? I'm not saying that these things don't happen. They absolutely happen in a completely normalistic distribution, right? An actual statistical, balanced out, properly numericized way, okay? That's all mathematics. We're not trying to use pure mathematics in a game that is supposed to resemble an actual paper game that exists, okay? At least that's my personal philosophy. So I'll say that right now, right? I believe Wizards should try to make the Arena Shuffler kind of close to reality. I don't know if that's what they do with MTG Online. I haven't played MTG Online in a decade, and I'm not going back. So it would be great if Wizards could make the Arena Shuffler a little less robotic feeling, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And hopefully I'll pull up the little graphic thing, which is not an advanced program. I'm a very amateur programmer, and I've, got this thing set up to where you can very easily find the one shuffle, not the one, but like the 5 shuffles out of 10,000 where you have situations where you have 17 or 18 cards with no lands. Those are a bright red line, and then it's as easy as saying, all right, don't pick that one. Don't give them that one. We've identified, and if you guys want to talk about the random number generation and seed picking and all that stuff, they know. they know the end result of these seeds, and they can, you know, it's not difficult. It's not difficult to parse the deck and say, oh, is there a subset where 17 or more, you know, lands or non-lands exist in a row. That's very doable, very capable. And I've been thinking about it, like, they really want to break it down. I'm not, like I said, I'm not a high level programmer or anything, but all the videos online I've watched talk about hash tables being the quickest way to transform and you know, execute things like this. And at the end of the day, all a shuffle is just like a hash table transformation. All they need to do is calculate, you know, 5 to 10 steps. Boom, 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 boom. Like you start here, you generate your random number seed, then you put the cards in that order, and then now that they're in that weird seeded order, then you execute your first hash function, and then they get shuffled. And the arrangement of that hash table, right, has been predetermined. It's all been predetermined. It's all been pre-shuffled. You can have a million shuffles, right? 10 million shuffles, 100 million shuffles, whatever. You can have such a high level number of shuffles that no one person is ever going to experience them all. And everyone that experiences them can still have a fair and enjoyable game, right? So you calculate all these shuffles beforehand, and then because you can just link hash tables to each other, and like I said, I'm not a high level programmer, but it's very easy to set up a series of tables that will be able to draw a path and arrive at any one of those millions of shuffles, right? And you'll know that they're good guaranteed shuffles, that there's no sections in there where somebody's going to be drawing 17 cards with no lands, and you're not going to give them an opening hand that looks good while the deck is not representative of something, you know, which could ever happen in real life. You know, so many arena shuffles could not happen in real life. So this is a little visualization identifying sections where there were stretches of cards 18 units long with no lands in between them. And yeah, there were a few. As you see, we scrolled past 2,000. I honestly don't think I've played 2,000 games of Magic the Gathering Arena. And one of the points that I've made in the video is that you can effectively have all of these shuffles predetermined and measured out. It's a hash table transformation. It takes less than a fraction of a second to do. So you can save a million shuffles, right? If somebody's played a million games of Arena in their life, please let me know. And so you can get rid of this, right? You can get rid of these bad shuffles. Change this down, right? Take it down to 15. Then yeah, of course there are a few more lines that show up, but you can determine, you know, like how much fun do you want your players to have? So there's a few more, right? And it's slightly more common, of course. But you can see that there's still plenty. And again, I don't think I've played 2,000 games of Arena in all the time that I've been playing it. So Wizards could very easily say that we're going to use 9,980 of these shuffles, and you should be good for a long time, right? It's not picking your spells for you and stuff like that. It's just giving you a distribution, and that's ultimately what we're talking about with probabilities and things like that, is the distribution. So the way Wizards has done it is they've cut the tails off of here, so you're not going to get all your lands on the bottom of your deck. You're not going to get all your lands on the top of your deck, but you might get a big chunk of something right in the middle. And again, if you want to say, sure, it's a possibility, you also have to accept the possibility that these shuffles exist. You can't just clip these shuffles off and say, okay, we're gonna not let this happen, but we are also going to let them have really unwinnable games. Straight up unwinnable game. We will give you an unwinnable game sometimes. Period. The end. And again, realistically, if a human shuffles a deck, you're not going to end up with chunks like this. You're not going to get results that leave you with massive gaps like that. Unless you're a really bad shuffler, you know. If you're that bad at shuffling, please have someone else shuffle your deck for you. It is not a bad thing to ask for help so that everyone has a good game. Or learn a different shuffle technique. Shuffle on the table. I don't know, man. There's a better way to do it. I would like to see the better way implemented. That's what this comes down to at the end of the day. I'm trying to illustrate the numbers that are available, the possibilities, and why I believe that Wizards is enforcing certain losses. So, in order to determine how many possible shuffle combinations, right, you do 60 factorial. You get a massive number. You get this number, right? 8.32 followed by 81 zeros. Huge number, right? And so in order to ask the question, how many shuffles would realistically be accepted at an event? How many shuffles would realistically represent something that could be achieved by human hands? What shuffles do not represent reality? You know, a shuffle where magically all the lands are on the top, all the lands are on the bottom. A shuffle where magically all the lands are exactly in the middle. You know what I mean? Things like that. Like, sure, in the theory of the outcomes, it's a possibility. Will that happen? No, absolutely not. If you do that, they will kick you out for cheating. So let's be real, okay? How do we represent the number of shuffles which could be considered legal or reasonable? Thank you so much to the people leaving comments about the experiences that they've had both on Shuffler and in person. Somebody commented that they had an extremely low land count deck and were in a mirror matchup against somebody else. They both went 12 draws and they were running extremely low. I think he said 18 lands, 17 lands, some insanely low land count. And they only went 12 draws in between. So getting 17 non-land draws in a deck with 22, it's statistically impossible in reality. And let me illustrate why right now. So we saw this big number. What is this big number? This is the big number. How can we represent, you know, a shuffle which has things stuck in groups? We can take this number and we can reduce it. So what does 59 factorial represent? 59 factorial is where two cards basically get stuck together and act like one. And so because these two cards are stuck together acting like one, you effectively have one less card in the deck. And you can put that number in Google and do whatever you want to do. Funny thing, if you put this number into Google and subtract this number from this number, there's still 81 zeros left over. So there are more than enough shuffles. But let's take it all the way down. Let's end up in the scenario where you have 17 cards stuck together, right? How many will this leave you with? 17 from 60 leaves you 43, right? Now, because this acts as one card, you have to add 1 to 43. You'll end up with 44. Now, if you take 44 and you factorial it, this is the number that you get. Way fewer zeros. What happens when you subtract this number from that number? You're subtracting the number. This number represents all shuffles, by the way. This is not just lands. This represents all possible shuffles in which 17 cards of a type are stuck together acting like one. So, this number minus the total number of decks leaves us with basically the same number. In here, these numbers are the same, right? You have to go 30 digits down the line to even have numbers change. And that's eliminating all possible combinations, all possible deck combinations where there are 17 stuck together. And just to make the point even more clear. Okay, good. Yes. So, still has 81 zeros. Okay. Yeah. You're one. I don't even know what this number is. You know what I mean? I know quintillions and nonillions and decillions and all up to that. I don't know off the top. This is close to a Google. It's close to a Google. It's almost got 100 zeros behind it. You are approaching a Google of shuffle combinations left over if you take out all of the bad ones. So we should do that. All right, so one of the final numbers I want to arrive at is obviously one of the most important numbers that we could ever deal with, and that's the Heatdeath of the universe. So at the end of all things, and effectively the end of time, because particles won't be moving around to really give the illusion of time passing anymore, 106 zeros until the Heatdeath of the universe. So if you take the subset of decks, right, and you play them, I guess if you play them once a year, there's enough to get you halfway to the Heatdeath of the universe. I feel like there's a song about this. 3.154 E. All right, cool. So we got 8.4 E to the 46. So if you played a game of Magic every second, it would take you 8.4 E to the 46 years. That's 8 followed by 46 zeros, years. And again, that's approaching halfway to the Heatdeath of the universe. If you play this subset of games, one game every second, complete game every second, if you play this subset, if you accept the theoretical statistical possibility that, yeah, man, it's possible to draw 17 cards, 17 cards with no lands. If you accept that as a theoretical acceptable possibility in your shuffles, then you are also accepting the fact that you can draw nothing, literally an unplayable hand, every second of your life to an effective infinite number of lifetimes. That's what you're saying. Okay, so what we're doing is we're making a deck of cards with lands or not lands, right? We've set it to 60, and then we've decided it's 22, just in this general setup by default. You can change all of these numbers at the very bottom. Don't worry about it right now. But we're defaulting to 60. In the results that you get for shuffling 150, I have a 150 shuffler over on the side that there we go. Yeah, 150 shuffler on the side. I've been doing lots of experiments. So yeah, 150 card decks should fail way more than they do. But yes, Arena is giving skewed results. So more on that later. So we make a 60 card deck, make 22 cards lands. What we're doing then is splitting the deck into two groups that are close but not exact sometimes. Just like when you normally split a deck in half in your hands, and really, you get close but it's not exactly half. So plus or minus 3, I feel like 6 cards. Most people are pretty good at picking close to 7 cards off the top of the deck, right? So you can get plus or minus 3 when you split the deck in half, and that's what this represents. Riffle shuffle 1 2x cards like a semi-reasonable mash shuffle. Right now we've got it set 1 to 4. You can change these numbers all you want. As long as you do a proper number of shuffles afterwards, these numbers don't really matter. As long as you're not doing 1 to 30, 1 to 30 card shuffle is just flipping 2 halves of the deck back and forth. So let's be clear on what the numbers represent. This is a reasonable number of cards that end up split between others in a mash shuffle situation. All right, this does not account for sometimes, yeah, you got that one big chunk of cards on top, but you yourself compensate for that by doing chunk shuffling. And so how do we imitate chunk shuffling? We take this. We literally just split the deck into 4 chunks, and then instead of going 1 2 3 4, we go 4 3 2 1, which is exactly what you're doing when you do a normal chunk shuffle. You take a big block off the top and you make that the bottom block now. In the future I'll vary this up, but right now it's doing 4 even splits. That does not affect things because, again, we're doing randomization up in here. And then so these two mixed up together are a general approximation of what a human does, right? And because it's going back and forth and doing these things over and over and over again, it is doing a better job of, one, establishing an actual random starting deck state, an initial state that's actually random, and then it performs transformations on it that mimic what happens in real life. And then how many times do we do it? Well, right now I'm doing it like 3 times. So first riffle shuffle, rearrange the chunks, then does 3 more riffle shuffles. So that's like mashing it together in your hands 3 times. 1, 2, 3. And then you do another chunk. Dunk, dunk, dunk. And then you do 1, 2, 3, another quick 3, and then you chunk it a few more times, and then you do 3 more riffle shuffles. And even with just this very small number of shuffles, this is 10 riffle shuffles altogether, right? And 3 chunk shuffles. So with 10 and 3, you get an actual normalized distribution that resembles what a human would do, okay? And this is how to visualize all that. Don't worry about any of this unless you're getting into matplotlib and all of this stuff. The size of the figures, most importantly, 4 wide, 500 long, because we've got 10,000 results. So down here, here's where you can change the number of lands. You can change the number of lands here, right? So just change that here, and then to check for different lengths of cards that are stuck together, acting like one. When you get a run of 18 cards with no lands in between, this is the number that you change for that, right? So if we wanted it to check for 15, for runs of 15, we would click that, and then there's a little play button up top, or whatever thing that you're doing to run your code. So now that we've adjusted the pixel size and whatnot, these little lines are much easier to see. So let's do some matrix scrolling, right? This is 10,000 shuffles with, and before I changed the variable, if there was 18, right? So I had 18 cards pulled in Arena with no lands in between. And now these green and black dots represent what would realistically, there we go. We've got 1, 2 examples of shuffles ending up with 18 in a row. Like I said, I'm not trying to make a shuffler that does not end up with these results. However, I have not played this many games of Magic the Gathering, and I've had more results than this that are not akin to what an actual human would produce. And again, thank you to all the people responding and leaving comments that, you know, they once they hit that 55% win rate on their deck, the brakes get pulled hard, and then the bad shuffles start coming in. And realistically, you get more shafted in Arena than you do in real life. Okay. Arena will try to pull the brakes on you. Arena will try and give you one of these red lines if you're doing a little too well. So you have to build a deck that can account for these results in your deck. And because of that, mid-range decks are getting kneecapped, and late game decks are non-existent, right? They're DOA. Let me see if I can really quickly. Okay, see, so this is 150 card decks. There are a lot of 150 card decks in Platinum. Or I think it's Platinum and Low Diamond. So obviously they're not doing well enough to make it to Mythic, and you can see why. But on 150 pixels wide, representative of 150 cards. Still 18 card subsets. And the thing about this is I'm trying to figure out a way. I think I figured it out, but I haven't put it in the code yet. I think there's a way to define if there are one or more subsets of a certain length. Because if we change this subset length to something like 15, what a subset length of 15 represents is having 7 cards in your hand that are all lands or non-lands, and then the 7, 8, however many cards, as for 15 it would be 8. The 8 cards after that also being the same, lands or not lands. So you effectively have 15 unplayable cards in a row. You could also think of that as the situation where you end up with 1 mulligan for 7 cards. You shuffle again, and then the next 7 cards that you draw are also unplayable. Calculating the statistical probabilities of that are a little bit more difficult, But because you are putting all the cards back into the deck and reshuffling, actual equal distribution on all of those probabilities. So you could say that combining the sets where your initial hand draws are unplayable into one line on this graph, because the length of the subset is such that it would contain both of those 7 card hands. You know, if you have familiarity with statistics, please point out to me why that is or is not something that could be considered. But anyway, yeah, there, did I click the button? I didn't click the play button. That's what I forgot to do. So we're going to generate right now 10,000 results, and we're going to look for subset lengths of 15, which I hopefully just explained means 2 mulligans, and after that, sure, maybe you're free to draw a playable hand, but you're starting with 5 cards. I hope the mic did not pick up that jaw pop. A 150 card deck, subset length of 15. We're trying to show that 150 card decks, which I like to call meme decks, are more prevalent in Magic the Gathering Arena because of the way that the shuffler gives you skewed results. This is what you could consider a failure rate for drawing hands, right? Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that all of these subsets are at the beginning. You know, you're not necessarily going to draw all 15 of these cards at the start. You know what I mean? They could all be right here, or it could be at the end. You could have a perfectly distributed hand out of that way. But again, this is only a random sampling of 10,000 draws out of nearly a Google. Okay, the percentage that this generated sample represents is so far down the line in zeros that we effectively can just assume that these are all literally unplayable starting hands. And that's what a little sample generation thing like this illustrate that point, because the numbers that we're dealing with are so huge, and these sample sizes are, you know, yes, everybody wants to talk about confirmation bias and small sample sizes and things like that, but let's be real, okay? These results mean that 150 card decks straight up shouldn't be viable. All right, if you want to scroll down this entire list of 10,000, I promise you there's at least 100 of these lines. Okay, more than 100 lines means a greater than 1% chance of failure. The probabilities of all of those cards working together should be impossible to run as an actual deck. But it works. It works because Arena fudges the numbers. And if Arena didn't fudge the numbers, and so to anybody who's stuck going up against the meme decks right now, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that they are really actually abusing the system against you. Play mono red and win. Use the matrix to your advantage. You have to abuse the system if you want to do well, and it's unfortunate. And it's wild to me that somebody actually commented, and apparently they do. I thought they were somebody who didn't play Arena, but apparently they are someone who plays Arena, and they cannot see that the things that they were speculating that my quote system would cause were already happening. And I'm sure there are people who get paid a lot of money to comment on the phenomenon like that. But here we are. I hope that I can at least break things down. And I'm sorry if I sound condescending. That's just my tone. I watched a Markiplier vid. I was like, I wonder what's up with this guy. And then somebody in the comment section said, yeah, he's just like that. Don't worry about it. I said, oh shit, okay, somebody like me. So then, yeah, so take it like that, please. You know, the New Jersey rubbed off on me, even though I only met one person from New Jersey. I hope everybody can agree that if they would only implement something as simple as this, right? And it could be more fun. It does happen. Like I said, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. But if they are going to somewhat select for the removal of, quote, impossible results, picking 3 of the best hands or your best chance at getting a good opening hand, whatever it is they do to smooth out the results, they just need to curve that shit right out. A lot more people would play the game, and Wizards would make a lot more money if that were the case.